call to order?
We are, and I have started the recording just.
Fantastic. Well, in that case, let's call our January JITPAC meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Lots of new faces and shifted roles here on the screen that we can see. So welcome all of you. As you all know, this is the space that we occupy together to ensure that our public services are greater than the sum of its parts. That has been something that has always been useful, but literally a matter of life and death here for the last couple of years, our ability to work together and serve our public together. So thank you all. Good to see you all. And maybe we'll start with a round of introductions around the circle. So JITPAC committee, we'll start with the committee and then move to staff and other attendees as well. Maybe start with county members.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioner Trista Matis Castillo, Ramsey County District 3.
Victoria Reinhardt, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 7.
Commissioner Tony Carter, District 4.
Commissioner Tony Carter, District 4 and guest.
Who is your guest, Commissioner?
Naomi Carter, daughter of Mayor Melvin Carter.
I see. Well, good morning, daughter of Mayor Melvin Carter. Who else do we got?
Ryan O'Connor, Ramsey County Manager. Good morning, everybody. Mayor, you want to go to the rest of the county team or you want to swing somewhere else? Otherwise, I'll pull you through the county team. Let me know.
Go ahead and just go through the county team.
All right, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer O'Rourke, Government Relations. Melissa Finnegan.
Melissa Finnegan, also Government Relations.
Luis.
Good morning, everyone. Luis Rosario, Ramsey County Assessor.
Elizabeth.
Good morning, everyone. Elizabeth Tolzman, Director of Policy and Planning.
I think we have a few. Renee, there she is.
Good morning, Renee Vogt, Deputy Director in Finance for Ramsey County.
Anyone else from the county I didn't just introduce? We got them all.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, all of our county partners. And the school district?
Zuki Ellis, St. Paul Public Schools Board Director.
Uriah Ward, St. Paul Public Schools Board Treasurer.
Hello, everyone. Jim Vu, Chair, St. Paul Public Schools.
Thank you.
Good morning. Marie Schruel, Chief Financial Officer.
Mary Gilbert, Legislative Liaison.
Arlene Schilling, Controller.
Lori Down, Controller.
Does that complete the school district employees, I assume? And with that,
Cedric is going to be joining us. He had another meeting, so he'll be on in a.
Got it. Thank you. I'll move to city employees. I'm St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter.
Good morning. I'm Amy Brenmone, City Council President.
Rebecca Naker, City Council Ward 2.
City staff.
John Grabner, Political Director in Mayor Carter's office.
Good morning, John McCarthy, Finance Director for City of St. Paul.
Good morning, Holly Houston, City Council Chief Budget Officer.
Good morning, Tara Baranock, Budget Manager, City of St. Paul.
Good morning, Madeline Mitchell, Senior Analyst on the city's budget team.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Christian Taylor, Government Relations.
City's rolling deep this morning. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Like I said, we have an agenda in front of us. I assume you all have that in front of you. And if there is a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Victoria. I move approval.
Thank you. And a second?
Trista will second.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we can call a vote on that. How have we been voting on where this is concerned? Just show of hands, I think, something.
Yeah, Mayor, we have not been doing roll calls over the last 2 years remote, so we could voice it or do it with hands.
Let's just do it with hands. All in favor of approving the motion, please just wave at the camera, give a thumbs up or something like that. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? We have an agenda. You also have the minutes in front of you from our previous meeting. I assume everyone has gotten a chance to review those minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve our minutes. Any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor, give your neighbor a high five. And all opposed? All right, we have minutes. So thank you very much. And with that, I think we're moving to jurisdictional legislative agendas, starting with the City of St. Paul, and I believe Christian Taylor.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy to provide a legislative update on behalf of the City of St. Paul. So as you can see on the slide, the first slide I have up is our capital improvement requests. And so the first four are our ranked priority requests to MMB. That would be number one, eastbound Kellogg River Center Bridge. That is an ask of $26 million, and that is our number one request. Super important and very critical to the city and our development efforts. Number two, we have the Great River Passage. That's a $20 million ask. Number three is Como Zoo, $12 million. And then number four is our North End Community Center at $16 million. Beneath that is the Playwright Center. That's our only nonprofit request that we're working jointly with, and that was on our MMB list. That's a $4.45 million request. And just to note, in the governor's recommended bonding list, Como Zoo and North End Community Center was included. Underneath that, though, I wanted to include our support items that we have a few of these on here. Kind of the biggest support item we have is the county's park at River's Edge. That's a $26 million ask. And then the Hillcrest redevelopment project, that's a $12 million ask this year. We also are supporting the work of the Reconnect Rondo for the Rondo Land Bridge. And then some newer additions on here are the Sana Foundation at $1.4 million and the Eastside Freedom Library at $300,000. Those are equity appropriations, so they're asking for cash this legislative session, and we are fully supportive of both of those asks. And if we could go to the next slide, John. And then so I'll kick it off with our priorities. And there's a lot of priorities on here, some that we will weigh and lean into more heavily than others. But far and away, our number one priority is just protecting our local government aid. In conversations with Chair Marquardt and Property Chair Joachim, we're confident that this discussion is going to come up at the legislature, and it's kind of been swirling for a while. Talks of redoing the formula. So our OFS staff and I have met a few times on this, and we plan to participate in various internal stakeholder meetings about this with the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities. But essentially, we support increasing our appropriation to address our unmet needs. And at the same time, we also support adjusting our LGA each year to account for inflation. And we're opposed to any reductions in our LGA. Kind of after that, we have our Heading Home Ramsey / Continuum of Care ask. So, huge shout out to our deputy mayor in the county and county staff who've all worked really hard on this with our partners. It's a kind of a four-pronged ask that we're fleshing out, but we're you know, it's getting primed. We're going to be meeting with legislators, and it's a four-pronged ask around increasing our shelter capacity for single bed occupancies for families, and then also funding our Familiar Faces pilot, and then keeping Freedom House afloat through the summer and ongoing. So that will be a big priority that we'll be working very closely with the county on. Catalytic converters is a priority for the city, and we've worked very closely with Senator Marty on legislation that we think would be effective in curbing the theft of catalytic converters from that's impacting our residents. And so we have buy-in from our city attorney, our police. We've testified multiple times in committee, so we'll be working closely with them. And essentially that legislation empowers our police to be able to, act on if they find or pull over a vehicle with multiple catalytic converters in their possession, and if they can't provide proof. So we'll be working closely with that, and that is also on the League of Minnesota Cities policy agenda. So, thank you, Council President Bren Bowen, for helping to push that forward. Digital equity will be a priority this session, not just digital equity, but we're really leaning into the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund. So for some context for us all, last year, there was roughly $180 million appropriated to the state of Minnesota. The legislature appropriated $70 million of that right away last year for DEED's border-to-border broadband program. There's just shy of 100 million remaining in that fund balance this year. And so the governor's broadband task force has recommended the remaining allocation be wholly appropriated to the border-to-border broadband program. But our libraries Director Pankert, and I have been meeting with legislators and pushing the fact that there's multiple uses that they can use this funding allocation for, and that includes digital connectivity and community health, like facilities and spaces. And so there's actually quite a bit of buy-in. Chair Fu Lee of the Capital Investment Committee is all in on using these funds for the different uses or categories of uses. And so we will be meeting with him, with our partners. Ramsey County, Hennepin County, City of Minneapolis are all committed to working with us on this front. And so, more to come on that. Moving down the list, 4D is on our list again. This has been, in discussion for a few years now. Nonprofit housing developers have asked for a decrease in the 4D classification rate. That's something that the city of St. Paul, along with pretty much every other city, is opposed to, just because we are worried about the tax impact on our single fixed income, low income families, and just, it's something we would support if there were guardrails that we know that the tax savings that these nonprofit developers have would trickle down to the renters and the tenants, so that we're in discussion with them. The Department of Revenue did a study last year, and we have a copy of that study. They will be presenting that to the legislature. I'm thinking mid-February, and so we can report back at a later date on that. Earlier this summer, Representative Steve Elkins had various press conferences around his Comprehensive Housing Affordability Act, and it was really driven, more by the market forces around single occupancy family homes, and so had kind of a deleterious effect on our permitting processes, our parkland dedication, our zoning control, and various aspects of that. And so we have concerns about that. And we've been working with the League of Minnesota Cities. They have a draft, which they're calling their Housing Spectrum Act, that we are very supportive of. And it's really quite innovative, allowing our HRAs to impose deed or registry taxes, thinking outside the box and trying to stave off corporate purchases of houses that in our community that eventually get flipped to rentals, expanded considerations for TIF, includes some tenant protections, grants to the city to develop more lots for housing, and preserves and bolsters our NOAA housing initiatives. Public safety, of course, will be a huge concern and priority for us, but specifically Representative Mariani has drafted a public safety innovation package, is what he's calling it, and it creates an Office of Public Safety Innovation, and among other things, will dole out grants to local governments and local community groups to help with community policing efforts. It's very similar in some regards to the city's community first public safety model. So we're supportive of that. And he and House leadership will be having a press conference on that today at 12:30. If you're interested in tuning in, otherwise, please contact me and I'm happy to give you more details on that. I have building codes listed on here that ties into the Comprehensive Housing Spectrum Act, but we are supportive of the DALI commissioner having the executive authority to set building code updates and standards. There's been a push at the legislature for the past few years for all adjustments to the building code to go through the legislature. We are opposed to that because we think the DALI commissioner and the TAG group that advises the commissioner, which is filled with professionals doing this work, really understands the issue and understands the need to keep up with building codes and energy standards and things like that. Housing in general will be on our list this session, and particularly anything that supports our local housing trust fund, NOAA preservation, low-income housing tax credits, or things that we are all supportive of, and we'll be watching out for the governor's supplemental budget in the next week or so that should be funding, that should have some more funding in housing. The historic rehabilitation tax credit is something that the city very much supports, and historically we've seen the legislature extend this, by 1 year or by 2 years. We are supportive of a permanent extension or multi-year extensions, just because we're finding internally when we are working with our staff and developers on redevelopment projects, sometimes they get tied up because we're not too sure if the historic tax credit will get extended or not. So there's this gap that is kind of uncomfortable for us when we're doing redevelopment projects. And finally, I have on here the Regional Parks and Trails Grant Program. I work in close partnership with the Regional Parks Partnership and our parks staff to get this funded annually so we can have funding for our parks. The governor's budget recommended $3 million for bonding projects this year for the Regional Parks and Trails system, which was a little bit lower than what we had hoped for, but we are in discussion and will continue to be in discussion with their office to kind of boost that up a little bit. So those are my updates. I'm happy to pass it on to the school or to the county, or stay online for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I think we'll go to the county first. Jen O'Rourke.
Thanks, Mayor Carter, and thanks, Christian, for setting us up so well. I think John was going to drive and bring up our slides for me. Christian did a great job just laying everything out, and as you probably would guess, we work hand in hand in a lot of what was he laid out in front of you, such as the parks funding and a lot of the housing issues too. So with me, just so you know, I have Melissa Finnegan with me today. She might be cleaning up or helping out with any questions at the end. She covers more of our health and wellness topics, public safety issues. I cover more of the property tax, transportation, housing stability issues for us at the legislature. Right here, we have a slide laying out our various priorities. I don't think there'll be any surprises here. This list of priorities very much lines up with our vision, mission, goals, and the work that you all do as local governments yourself. The homelessness package that's coming out of the continuum of care will be a big focus, I think, for us and others this year at the Capitol. We're putting kind of the details on that and working through whom our best legislative champions might be and starting to meet with folks on that. It's exciting, important work, and we look forward to all the coalition partners that will be coming to the table to help advance that as well. Next slide, please. As Christian laid out, this year is a bonding year, as most of you know, and the county's working in that space to advance 3 projects at the top that we put through MMB, which is Minnesota Management and Budget, their process going back to June. No surprise at the top is our number one, the park at River's Edge for $26 million. Both Representative Mariani and Senator Sandy Pappas continue to be our legislative champions for this project. If you've been following it from the get-go, the original ask was around $40 million, and just because of negotiations and whatnot with AECOM and putting the numbers together, we're able to bring that down to a respectable $26 million that we're asking the state to partner with us for. Just last week, we had the Senate Republicans at St. Paul College for what they call their bonding tour. We weren't able to actually get down to see the River's Edge because it was, I think, -3, but it was a very good dialogue with the Senate Republicans and Senator Pappas and others on this project. We were able to also lay out our vision for Rice Street Revitalization and the Bruce Vento Trail Extension. As you can see on this slide, those are much, much smaller amounts of money. I would say we did advance both of these through Representative McCollum's community projects, federal work last, that was happening almost a year ago now. As the city well knows and others, none of that has come to fruition. We're looking for the state's partnership for these projects and are just hopeful for a big bonding bill that passes at the end in May or June. We do have support for other bonding requests on here. You see at the bottom, the Kellogg River Center Bridge, which is the #1 priority of the city, of course, and then the Gibbs Farm Pathways to Dakota and Pioneer Life, which is a priority of the Ramsey County Historical Society. We're supportive of that as well. Next slide, please. I started this slide just because it's such an important part of the work that we're doing right now. I think housing advocates were happy to see a lot of the housing that was included in the governor's bonding bill. We're hopeful for more this week. And obviously that lines up with some of the continuum of care work that we hope to advance. There'll be more details coming out on what tax relief, mental health, or public safety funding means coming out of the governor's budget. For those who are close to it, this could be money for local governments through CPA or LGA. For anybody new to this meeting, LGA and CPA, which is local government aid for cities and county program aid for counties, those are more of what I think of as our general purpose funds that we get from the state. Those are important pots of money to watch just because that could be at the end of the day where they help us with any of our homelessness efforts and are always in the tax bill, which is one of the last things to pass. Next slide, please. I included this one at the end as sort of a catch-all. It may be something for your dialogue later, but I wanted to just point out a few things that are good to know or keep track of as we move through the end of the legislative session. The digital equity position is a new one to our platform, and I know the city of St. Paul as well. There was new homelessness prevention aid in last year's tax bill that starts in fiscal year, I think 2023. For the county of Ramsey, that would be about $3 million a year. It's an interesting thing to keep track of just because it has us working with the Department of Education and then obviously the school districts on tracking some of this. We as county lobbyists met with Representative Gomez, who of course is from Minneapolis, about a week or two ago, and she was highlighting again just her concern that this go to families to help with their what they need to do around keeping homes and whatnot, and not so much for administration and whatnot. She is open to tweaking that if we see policy changes that need to happen in this legislative session. So we'll be working with her on that. Representative Frazier is coming forward with a bill. I think Christian alluded to it with Representative Chair Mariani's work to support criminal justice and policing reform. And then finally, I just wanted to point out on the suburban side of things, there is a Ramsey County League of Local Governments that meets at least 1 to 2 times a month. They met last Friday. Melissa and I were there with a couple of our county commissioners. I should say we were there virtually, but this may be a group that the city and the school district want to connect with or get those meetings on your calendars, just because it helps create a good coalition going forward for the rest of session. And I'd be glad to help create that link. That's all I have today, Mr. Chair. And if you'd like us to stand for any questions at the end, we certainly will.
Thank you very much. And yes, I think we will ask for just taking any questions collectively at the end. Go to Mary Daughtry for St. Paul Public Schools.
Thank you and good morning. If you could bring up our slides. Thank you. You can go to the next one. These are just the 5 main areas. And I try to identify things where there's overlap with the city and the county. But you can go to the next slide. We can get into the detail on those. I think the forecast gave us an opportunity to look at some systemic changes with the education formula. It got, in the last recession, inflation was taken out of the formula and they significantly cut funding to our 2 big areas, our 2 biggest mandates, one of them being special education, and then the other being English language learner revenue, which hasn't been updated for 21 years. And as you know, we are governed under the federal rules around serving special education students. And when it was first passed, the federal government said that they were going to contribute 40% of the funding toward this population. Right now, the federal share for special ed is 5.9%. That's how low it's gotten. And the reason that these 2 are high priority issues for the district is because the underfunding of special ed and EL really drives referendum levies across the state, because districts have to ask local taxpayers to raise revenue locally to cover what the state doesn't pay for these 2 large mandated areas. And both are really critical for our populations to ensure that they're college and career ready when they graduate from the St. Paul schools. The other, the compensatory formula, and that's one of the formula that drives revenue to buildings with high poverty. And it's based on our free and reduced lunch counts. Because of all the COVID waivers around providing nutrition, which is a great thing, it's been very difficult for us to get those forms actually back from families, because they get the nutritional services whether or not they fill out the form. And that does affect the revenue that we receive for those buildings that have high poverty. So we are working, we did get some good news this year that the state has applied for, and it was approved, that they can do direct certification for our nutrition programs now, using medical assistance as one of the programs that they can directly certify families that would be eligible for the nutrition programs, which would then increase our compensatory revenue as well. The next slide, please. I would have to say that this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we've had. And it is from licensed teachers to school bus drivers has been a huge issue for us, filling our bus routes. We have about 100 positions open for ed assistants and paraprofessionals, clerks, nutritional programs. We've relied, I've delivered food during the COVID pandemic because we've been short of staff. And we have folks from 360 and anybody who's been on special assignment have actually all been working in the schools because of our workforce shortage. We did get some good news around the school bus driver issue, that we're working with the federal government and the state to provide a little bit of flexibility in some of the credentialing for school bus driver for the commercial license that they need. But it's kind of, we're working with a large stakeholder group to look at every single area about how we can recruit more and make sure that we have enough staff to cover the positions in our buildings. And that's everything, again, including substitute teachers, which we've had a shortage of now, which have been desperately needed because we've had staff out with COVID. Next slide, please. Enhancing taxpayer equity. As all of you know, for example, St. Paul's property tax base is not as rich as Minneapolis or Edina or Minnetonka or St. Louis Park. And so taxpayers in the city of St. Paul pay a larger share of their personal property taxes to support everything from our referendum levy. And the state has not kept up with those equalization formulas that create tax fairness across the state for the differences in property wealth. So if there's some revenue that's put into property tax relief this year, it should be the school formula should be included in that. And then we also oppose using taxpayer subsidies for vouchers, tax credits, or private school scholarships, which, as you know, has been included in the Senate Republican education bill last year. Next slide, please. And as the county, particularly in the city, know, especially in a supplemental budget year, there's a lot of interest in passing new mandates. And often these mandates come without any funding attached to them. And so as a general principle, we have a position that we would oppose any new mandate that's not appropriately funded. We are also looking at the current mandates that we have in reporting requirements to make sure that we, again, given our staff shortage, so that we can manage the reporting requirements in a way that's useful for informing the work that we do and not just providing information that doesn't provide any value. And then finally, allowing school boards to renew their existing referendum without spending, raising the money and taking the time for us to go through another election. This has no fiscal impact because there is not a single school district referendum that has been renewed that hasn't passed. And we did have bipartisan support for this last year, but it unfortunately did not make it to the finish line. And then the slide covers all the areas that the city and the county have already discussed. We've been part of the Housing Coalition, support for mental health grants, not only through the schooling mental health programs, but also we've been working with the Department of Human Services to reimburse our own social workers who provide mental health services. That's the one area that's been problematic with the state, where we provide mental health services that are eligible for medical assistance reimbursement because the process that they use, it hasn't worked for schools. And then we have multiple partners that help provide both summer school and high quality after school programs for us. And those are our highlights for for this session.
Thank you much. Any questions for Christian, Jennifer, or Mary?
Mayor
Mr. O'Connor? Ryan?
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Just a comment. It stands out. It's important that all three jurisdictions there highlighted the piece around homelessness and stabilization as we're working to build more affordable housing. It's really good to see that. I came into this curious to see how that would show up and play. And with the article that ran this weekend that involved our jurisdictions, everything we can do to keep that momentum moving, I just wanted to underscore that and thank our ledge staff for all bringing that to the fore.
Thank you, and I certainly agree with that. Chair Matas-Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. Ryan beat me to the punch. I was going to say the same thing. So thank you very much for working on that collaboratively as we move forward. It's critical to stabilize our family.
Without a doubt. Thank you much. Councilmember Naker.
Thanks, Mayor Carter. In some ways, Ryan and Trista both beat me to the punch since I was going to say the same thing, but also ask, I'm really concerned about this, as I know we all are, and I'm seeing that all of us have a number of priorities on our lists that we're all advocating for and put together. It's a long list. I guess I'm just wondering, from our legislative affairs staff who are the experts on this, are we doing the right thing to make sure that it's clear that the unsheltered homelessness funding issue is our top priority, and really that's where we need to succeed on that issue. I know we have many other things we also want to succeed on, but I'm just wondering, does this look right to you to make that issue rise to the top?
Any thoughts on that? Jen, are you responding to that?
Mayor Carter, I'm happy to jump in as the lead on that. I'm happy you brought that up as a question, Councilmember Naker, because it's an important one. And I think we and our friends across the river always come across as having a lot of needs. You know, there's a 10-page letter going to the governor today from the Continuum of Care that lays out so much of the good work that's been done by the city and county and others in this space. And, you know, once those, I'll just say it, once those go out, usually they kind of become public as they're shared with other legislative leaders and whatnot. I think that's a good way to get public on it. I think the Strib article this weekend was also helpful in sort of advancing that issue and whatnot. As you know, I'll just wrap up with this. It all kind of blends together, you know, and that's why I talked about the importance of county program aid and local government aid and paying attention to what these other big pots of money are. The state's ARP dollars, frankly, and our own ARP dollars. You know, there'll be a lot of questions and whatnot about how this money all matches up and is getting used. And, you know, I know you guys will be in front of the legislature and we will be asked the same thing, not just on the housing side, but on important things like transportation requests too. There's already a hearing, I think, on February 3rd that Representative Hornstein has asked local governments to come forward to talk about some of their transportation needs so that they, I think, as the legislature can start to understand how all these funds may match up at the end of the day. And I can only assume the same conversations are happening in the education space.
Thank you, and that makes good sense. Director Ellis.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask some follow-up questions about the catalytic converter. It was mentioned, I believe, in the city update. And that happened to us for the second time while we were attending a swim meet on Friday at OWL, one of the open world learning, one of our 6 through 12 schools. And so I'm just sort of wondering, because I don't know what currently happens. I just sort of hear rumblings of that, you know, even if you find them in cars, like police officers still have to let people go. I'm just wondering, like, what are we believing is something that isn't happening, but needs to happen? Because it's $6,000 to replace them if you don't have insurance. And that means you're without a car, and sometimes there isn't money to replace it, and some of these cars get totaled depending on their age. And so I'm just wondering what more proactive things we can be doing as city and county and school district, right? Because this did take place at a school. It's not the first time it's happened to our employees in St. Paul Public Schools. So just kind of curious as to what we believe we can do right now. Even, and I know that there are 7 different bills right now that are talking about it at the Capitol, that none of them passed. And so I think that this is going to continue to be an issue and a concern for community. And I'm one, really frustrated, and 2, knowing that just nothing happens. And we're just eating the cost as families and community members when this happens to us.
Director Ellis, yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and I'm sorry to hear about that. Unfortunately, it's not surprising, and so I'll provide some context for you. So the last legislative session, Senator Marty proposed legislation that, as I mentioned, we really supported, and we fought with him and our partners to get that included. So we had multiple hearings. We had our St. Paul police officers testify in front of committee and speak to legislators. Fast forward to the end of session, and we're in conference committee, and there's a lot of support for this bill. and it doesn't get included for whatever reason. And everything I heard was the Senate Republicans were just vehemently opposed to it. And I think it's because there's some Senate Republican members who may have, you know, just constituents who work in the scrap metal business, and, you know, they're looking out for their constituents. But what instead passed was a catalytic converter theft pilot prevention program. And I like to say, I mean, it's what the city of St. Paul is doing. It's marking the catalytic converters under your vehicle. And I think that's, you know, I'm also saying that's part of the equation. That's one side of the coin. You need those prevention efforts. But I think, you know, honestly, we need to empower our police officers to, when they pull over someone and there's 5 catalytic converters in their vehicle, and right now they're unable to tie that to the criminal statute, so they have to let them go. And then there's all these other considerations too, like there's not time for police officers to do the administrative work of going and checking each catalytic converter with VIN numbers and things like that. And how I also explain it, like I'm a car guy, and you would never have those many catalytic converters in your car. Honestly, they're tied to the entire exhaust system. So to you and to me and to everyone else, it seems pretty plainly, pretty clear that it's, you know, those are stolen catalytic converters. So his bill goes into, you know, tying the number of catalytic converters to the criminal theft penalty. So like, say you have 1 or 2 in your vehicle, that might be a gross misdemeanor, and then 3 might be a misdemeanor, 4 might be a felony, and it should be tied to the cost of the catalytic converter, because as you mentioned, like it's really expensive to replace those in vehicles. And what we're also seeing is it's an equity issue too, because it's happening to people with older cars, not like brand new cars. They're older cars, they get them stripped, they can't take their kids to school, they can't go to work, they can't go to doctor's appointments. So it has, you know, kind of wide-ranging effects in everyone's lives too. So we'll be working closely with Senator Marty again. I know Representative Hollins and our delegation is all in on supporting this. Council President Brenmo and our city councils super supportive of this. So it's you know, and then St. Paul and Minneapolis, we have our ordinances too. So like the city's doing stuff, but now is the time that we really need the legislature to step in to really curb these thefts. So I guess to your point, how can we help? You know, you certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to set up meetings with legislators. Reach out to Senator Marty and show him your support. Reach out to the Senate members on the various committees and tell them that we need to see changes to curb catalytic converter theft. So I hope that answered some of your questions, Director Ellis.
It did. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And I echo that. We're really sorry to hear that happen. And, you know, this is something that's just, you know, been really a frustration. I know the city council has taken that up, and, you know, our law enforcement officers have been frustrated. It feels like a law change is really needed to be able to kind of continue to advance that work. Deputy Mayor Tincher.
Thank you, Mayor Carter. I just wanted to speak to the previous question. I know it's true. St. Paul has many, many really important and urgent requests for the legislature, and now is the time to make those requests, given the state of the budget and the resources that are available. And I know that Christian and our lobbying team and our partners in Ramsey County are going to make sure that we're prioritizing all of those needs and doing everything we can at the Capitol. I just wanted to speak to the request for shelter space and the capacity. As everybody on this call knows, the city and the county and all of our incredible teams and our partners have done amazing work through a pandemic to address what has been, you know, a crisis for a long time. And the gains that we have made in terms of stabilizing so many people in our community, we don't want to go backwards on that. And what I would say is there's the residents in need that we are able to serve, and reminding folks that, like, it's life or death. And we literally had people that died in the cold, despite all of the efforts, and that would have been worse had we not done everything that everybody on this call supported and has worked hard for. And then there's, you know, our economic development piece of it, where, you know, encampments and homelessness impacts our businesses. and it impacts our neighbors who are housed. And so a lot of those efforts that we've been doing in our public safety emergency response space for optimal response, where we've at the city added a housing coordinator who is doing that continued outreach now. We've done through our coast unit, our fire department with their co-response unit. All of those things are to continue to do the work that we've been doing. And what I hear from all of those folks and all of our nonprofit outreach partners is that's really good and we need that piece of it. But when they make that connection, if they don't have a place for that individual to go that meets their needs, it's for naught. So, you know, that's why I just wanted to weigh in and say, however, we need to work together to really hone that message so that we can talk to legislators and the community about just how transformational that piece, being able to fund this so that we can get that bridge to the affordable housing investments that both the city council and the county board have made with ARP dollars is just really transformational for the city of St. Paul and Ramsey County. And frankly, the regional, all of our regional partners that, you know, the county and where the services are provided, that we shoulder that responsibility. So I'll stop there.
Mary?
And thank you. The interesting thing about COVID, when we took a look at our McKinney-Vento population, which is the program that we run jointly with Ramsey County, and those are for our highly mobile and homeless youth, was that the number of kids that we served under that program actually went down. And that was because of the eviction moratorium was in place at the time. There was the federal subsidies for families. Folks that got laid off were having the benefit of the unemployment income. And so it really did, frankly, stabilize some of the housing situation. That was I would say, the only upside of COVID that we had. And so we'll check in and look at the numbers lately. But from our perspective, while there's not enough shelter space or our families might get put in a motel temporarily, I mean, for our families, we really are looking for long-term permanent housing solutions for them rather than the emergency shelter, you know, that sometimes our families have to go when we identify kids that might be in a car or had recently been evicted or, you know, for whatever reason. So we are 100% behind looking for some permanent housing solutions for our families so they are not having to rely on the emergency shelter space or a motel.
Thank you much. That's something I know that we all kind of agree on. Chair Madison Seal, I can go to you. I want to make sure we have time for the budget updates by jurisdiction, but I can go to you for closing comments on that subject.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I'll be really quick. I think what's important here on this level is that it's not an either or for us. As we've invested upstream in affordable housing and really building out that ability for families to have permanent housing, we have this bridge opportunity in this interim because those projects take 3 to 5 years to achieve, and we need so much of it that it isn't an either or. So we're thinking about how do we stabilize our families while we're getting permanent. So I just hope that the SPPS will support us in the both and, that we need money for shelter that stabilizes family and prepares them for success for that permanent housing. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Chair Madison Castillo. With that, let's move forward to, obviously these are conversations we could have all day long because they're really critical and it's important for us to have these conversations. I want to make sure that we get time because we're up against a time crunch now here. So let's go to the city's team for the first budget update. Madeline?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, John. All right, so as we highlighted at this meeting in September, last year's budget focused on financial restraint and the what we called the 3 zeros. That was a 0 property tax increase, 0 staff layoffs, and 0 use of the city's emergency reserves. Now this year for the 2022 budget, while we know the pandemic is still impacting all of our lives and our work, we are seeing those signs of economic recovery. And we have that significant support coming from the federal government via the American Rescue Plan. So with that in mind, the 2022 adopted budget focuses on restoring critical services and leveraging these major opportunities to continue to invest in St. Paul's future. The 2022 adopted budget includes a 6.17% increase in the property tax levy, which is a reduction from the maximum tax levy set in September and the levy included in the proposed budget, which was a 6.9% increase over 2021. The final levy amounts to approximately $10.50 a month on the median value home. And that allows us to continue providing high quality service to the residents and businesses of St. Paul. The 2022 budget utilizes funding from the American Rescue Plan, and the city's strategy for these funds over the next few years includes investing $40 million each, excuse me, in neighborhood safety, housing strategies, and jobs and career readiness. And finally, for this slide, the city's capital budget takes advantage of low interest rates to finance 3 major projects over the next 2 years. That's the Hamlin Midway Library, North End Community Center, and Fire Station 7. And on the next slide, other investments in the 2022 operating budget include restoring services and vacant positions that were reduced in 2021, and the creation of an Office of Neighborhood Safety to advance the Community First Public Safety framework that the city and community partners have been building for several years now. The budget also includes significant funding for the Law Enforcement Career Path Academy, increases in funding for pedestrian and bicycle safety, as well as graffiti and plywood abatement, and the creation of a $1.6 million council neighborhood development fund, as well as other smaller investments in city departments. So in addition to investments, the 2022 budget includes adjustments to revenue projections, resulting in an overall net increase in budgeted revenue of $11.1 million, which includes that 6.17% levy increase and accounts for revenues that are seeing slower recovery, like lodging taxes and parking, and reductions to some city department spending to balance the budget. The city also plans to use $3.3 million in ARP funding for budget stabilization in 2022. And this slide shows, lost my slide here. This slide shows the overall structure of the city's ARP strategy for the next few years. As mentioned earlier, the city will invest $40 million each in neighborhood safety, housing, and jobs and career readiness programs. The remaining 46 million of the city's allocation will support the modernization of city services, financial stabilization, vaccine and public health engagement, and the costs of administering such a large influx in federal funding. On the right side, you can see the timing of the use of the first $83.3 million installment. $2.2 million was spent in 2021, with $45.5 million budgeted for use between 2021 and 2022, leaving $35.7 million currently in development. And on the next slide is a more detailed breakdown of the ARP funding in the 2022 budget and the funding carried forward from the 2021 allocation. One of the big items here and a major point of coordination between our jurisdictions is the $20 million planned for housing, which is part of a total $37.5 million commitment from the city for deeply affordable housing. The county is making a similar commitment for a combined $74 million investment in deeply affordable housing in our community. There's also $11.9 million budgeted for neighborhood safety, $9 million for financial stabilization, which includes the restoration of parks and library staff mentioned earlier, and support for the River Center ramp. And a smaller allocation, but still worth noting, is the funding for works progress, specifically the Right Track expansion, Right Track Plus expansion, which is another really great opportunity for coordination between the city and the county. And then finally, there is that $3.9 million for administration. And finally, on our last slide here, we have some resources online for folks who want to dig into the budget even further. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. I will follow the same trajectory. Go to the county, Alex.
Alex is not here today, so this is Renee, the Deputy Director in Finance, and I will be presenting the Ramsey counties. So our 22-23 budget, as approved in December of 2021, we remained true to the vision, mission, and goals that we had set forth. We are building on our transformative change initiatives that we brought forth in the 2020-2021 budget. The exciting information we're going to add is expanding the foundational of excellence. And we are continuing to advance collaboration throughout our service team deliveries through our service teams. We are continuing our residents first initiatives, and we're going to focus on the systems reform, racial equity, and community engagement. So during the 2022-2023 budget preparation was the first year that we did some community engagement around the budget, and we are going to continue in that space as we move forward. The next slide for the details. The 2022-2023 budget has a proposed increase of the tax levy of 1.55 in 22 and a 4.54 in 23. We also had a 0% levy increase, so we're trying to smooth the lines from the 0% into the 2022-2023 budget. Overall, the budget will increase 3.2 in 22 and a 1.2 in 23. We are including a $20.15 million investment of our ARPA funding into the 22-23 biennium. Along with that, Regional Rail had set their budget authority at the max, which is a 22 increase of 7.4%. 23 is a 3.1% increase. Something new to the 22-23 budget is the HRA set their first levy. They are going 11.1 and 11.1 in 22 and 23. They are going to set it at the maximum. We're going to continue to meet our values. The exciting news is a foundation of excellence. We will be building an internal audit office, and we are going to build a capacity for our investigations, which will mainly focus on compliance and policies. The foundation of excellence will also continue the operation of services and contracting that we have foreseen throughout the pandemic. This was crucial to our success as we moved and supported our departments. We will also be doing some changes around the payroll, and we will be including the inclusion and access capacities. Will focus on increasing our investment in those areas. Once again, our transformative change. As always, we're going to be supporting the vision, mission, and goals and strategic priorities. We are focusing on people and service delivery, both those served in Ramsey County and those who work for Ramsey County. The system information, we are particularly in building wellness and healthy communities, and that reduce the justice system responses. And we will also be focusing on successful implementation and managing change through resources and improved structures to ensure our efforts are start a vision. And that is all we have for Ramsey County. Ryan, did you want anything to add to that?
It's a huge deal to enact $11.1 million a year toward affordable housing that didn't exist before this year, and that's an ongoing number. And just the continued collective recognition you heard from the city about the challenges of both using funds that are available to work through the pandemic while trying to build sustainability. It's a challenge that we face as well, and I just want to add voice to that. Great job, Renee. Thank you.
Thank you much, Renee. I appreciate that. And to Cedric Baker for St. Paul Schools update.
Thanks, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. And I know our CFO, Chief Shrule, is with us, and so definitely ask her to add anything at the end. But based on our budgeting timeline and process, we're actually in the middle of putting together our upcoming budget. And so we don't have the same type of details and specificities as others do around an adopted budget. But what we wanted to do was share information about what we're doing in around ARP dollars and how we're planning to use those dollars and how we have been using those dollars. So as you can see on this slide, we're really committed and focused on these 4 priorities. Number 1, and really important to us, is safely reopening schools for all students. And everything that comes with that, making and ensuring that students are in a safe environment, teachers, staff members are also in a safe environment. Number 2, addressing pre and post-pandemic unfinished learning. Some people refer to this as learning loss. We would like to refer to it as unfinished learning because there was a lot of learning that could have taken place but did not based on COVID. Number 3, building lasting equitable systems of teaching and learning. As many of us know in this meeting, we already had inequitable systems of teaching and learning. And so what COVID did was actually pull those up and pretty much exacerbated them. And so what we're trying to do is really focus in how do we do this differently? How do we support our students within teaching and learning? And lastly, supporting students and staff social emotional needs, returning to full on-site learning. This is also extremely important to us. But also in addition to our students' needs, we're also seeing that staff are also having those same types of needs. And so we want to do our best to support our staff as well. We can move on to the next slide. So as I said earlier, safely reopening schools for all students, we have used a lot of our ARP funding for building maintenance and cleaning. We've added in custodial staff and trade staff to keep the buildings clean. We have also did our best to ensure that we have ventilation systems upgraded within our schools to ensure. And I'll just say this, this was definitely a concern from parents, but also staff members in our buildings. And so we wanted to make sure that parents could feel comfortable, but also staff members in our buildings, that our ventilation systems were up to date. Moving on to school health staff, we added in nursing staff and health staff as well. We have bought so many masks, as many of you all have as well, and that continues to be our priority. And then lastly, just on this slide, I'm really grateful, County Manager O'Connor, for our partnership with Ramsey County Health. Invaluable partnership. We continue to meet with them multiple times within the month to understand what's going on and to help us strategize.
Hey, you being naughty girl.
To help us move forward on our next steps. You can move to the next slide. Addressing unfinished learning and social emotional support. These are some of the examples of where our funding is going: summer and after school programming, also community partnerships. I know late on time, but I wanted to focus on community partnerships. One of the ways that we wanted to ensure that we were investing was in community partnerships. And the reason I bring this up is because we understand that this is a short funding cycle of cash for us through the federal government, and we are not going to continue to move ourselves out of this dilemma of just adding on FTEs within the school district. And so we said, why don't we partner with community partners, those in the community that understand our kids, know our kids, live in the same communities as our kids, to help us fix some of this, to help us support our students, to help us with some of the issues that we feel are really dire, to making sure that they have the success that they need. And so we're setting aside $10 million. More information is coming out with that, but different community partners will be able to apply for those funds. And I want to make sure that everyone in this meeting have information. So if you know community partners that are dealing with tutors or focus area, content areas in math, or maybe social emotional support, those partners will be able to apply for these funds and support our students. We can move on to the next slide. Building equitable systems of teaching and learning. We've moved some funds to support recruiting and retaining diverse staff. I think Mary Gilbert also kind of highlighted this, just the shortage in many of our institutions on staffing. And we're, in addition of trying to recruit and hire staffing, we also want to make sure staffing is diverse based on the makeup of our student population. And then culturally responsive instruction, CRI, making sure that we are investing in this as well. And then lastly, student and staff social and emotional support, social workers and counselors. We moved and set aside funds to hire those types of staff members. And then the social and emotional learning support, so a district mental health coordinator, and then including SEL activities in high school and middle school courses. Of course, wellness activities as well. I think the last thing I'll say is right now we're just really taking an all hands on deck approach to the school district. We are definitely dealing with staffing issues, and we're in a very interesting situation that we definitely have funding to support our students, but we don't necessarily always have the capacity for the funding. And so we're trying to think of creative ways to get this funding out to meet the needs of our students while also tackling and dealing with a staffing shortage. Chief Schrull, is there anything that you wanted to add at all?
Thank you, Chief Baker. Again, my name is Marie Schrull. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for St. Paul Schools. I think what I'll add is, again, like Chief Baker said, it's been definitely a challenge so far this year, just trying to, again, get the funding where it needs to be, but again, trying to meet that challenge with staffing and filling positions. Again, we don't have a budget update today because we are on a different fiscal year cycle than the city and county. So again, I'd like to request that at our next meeting, we do provide you with that update. Our fiscal year cycle is July through June. So again, we would like to request that we provide that at our next meeting. And just to provide just a brief update, our levy did come in at 3.15%. So just that to highlight from our December final certification. So again, thank you. And that's all I have to update today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any questions about any of those budget updates we just heard? Sounds like no. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I think we have a couple of future meeting dates on the calendar. I have March 28th, 2022 and June 27th, 2022. It says discussion and review. Is there any discussion or review of those future dates? Good talk, everybody. All right. Well, then in that case, I think that comes to the end of our agenda. We're about 17 minutes ahead of schedule. Any other new business or other objects that we need to discuss? In that case, we can give ourselves 17 minutes back. Thank you all for a good meeting, and I will see you all on March 28th.
Thank you. See you.
Bye, everybody.